So a plastic Leviathan Dreadnought, a very expensive box set called Heta Gladius, a possible May or June release for the big box, and some really interesting new reactions mechanics. Loads of juicy details appear to be emerging, so let's do a roundup of all the leaks and rumours for the Horus Heresy. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking about a few more rumours as to this very big Horus Heresy release that's coming sometime in the next few months. Games Workshop officially announced it and showed off that awesome release trailer back in their Adepticon reveals, and we've already seen a fair few images of the big launch box that's going to be coming for the game. There's a whole load more hints and teasers and rumours about the release, so I thought we'd go through a few of them today. First up, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's been going last chance to buy on the Forge World web store, likely to mean that there's going to be plastic kits to replace them. Games Workshop has a Horus Heresy event lined up, which gives us a pretty good idea as to the time frame for the release. There's a big list of rumoured releases and prices as well, perhaps giving us some ideas for the name and prices of the box. And then there's a fair few leaked rules for the new edition coming out. In particular, I wanted to focus on one really interesting mechanic called reactions. Loads to talk about, so let's jump straight in and talk through each one of these briefly. First up, and perhaps some of the most concrete information that we have, is that there's an absolute ton of really popular resin kits going last chance to buy over on Forge World, the sort of thing that I'm pretty certain sells very well for Forge World out of their range. And a lot of these, I think that the only real explanation for them going last chance to buy is that there's going to be a plastic version coming out at some point in the near future. It does seem that Games Workshop are basically trying to convert the most popular things out of the Forge World range into their own plastic kits, so it really does seem quite plausible that we might be seeing things like the Sicaran battle tank, and potentially Deimos patterns of rhinos and predators reimagined in plastic. I've seen a few people talking about the possibility of the Horus Heresy range being a sort of split range. The core kits and main units for the armies will generally be made by Games Workshop, and Forge World will keep control of making sculpts for Primarchs, certain special characters and niche upgrades. In any case, these ones going last chance to buy I really don't think would just be getting removed from the web store, and I think that there's a very good chance that a lot of these are going to get new full plastic kits, which is really quite exciting. There's a couple of things that I think could have been predicted quite easily. First up, the Spartan battle tank, the enormous quad las cannon Land Raider, and one that we've already seen in that big box preview, so there's no surprise that that might be going away from Forge World, and also the standard Contemptor Dreadnought. Again, we've already spotted the plastic version of that in the launch box for the Horus Heresy. It appears that the individual Legion-specific sculpts aren't being taken away, it just seems to be the main Contemptor Dreadnought and also the arm upgrades. In any case, I think that's a pretty reasonable one to redo as a plastic kit. Games Workshop do have that very simplistic plastic one, but people just generally aren't too impressed with that as a model. It's only got some very limited options, and really isn't posable at all. Again, it seems that the standard Leviathan Dreadnought seems to be going away. For this one, it just looks like the main body is. It doesn't seem that they're pulling any of the arms or the Legion-specific ones this time. I certainly see why they'd choose that to reimagine in plastic. Leviathan Dreadnoughts have got to be one of the most popular Forge World kits for 40k. The Sicaran battle tank also seems to be going too. The variants seem to remain, but the standard one is going, which again makes me think it could be reimagined. So is the Deimos pattern rhino, the one that you see on the bottom right here. The one that basically looks like the bigger version of the original plastic rhino that's very, very tiny. And probably to no one's surprise, the Corvus Armour Space Marines also going. I guess there's not really that much point in Forge World selling the Mark 6 armour if it's going to be so easily available in plastic. As well as that, several of the Horus Heresy rulebooks seem to be going last chance to buy, and there's a few other things that seem to be going away that I think are less likely to be back. A couple of slightly more niche 40k vehicles and the Landspeeder Tempest with the Assault Cannon and the Damocles Command Rhino, and then a few of the quite nice sculpts for Forge World special characters, Kassan Sabius, Loft Huron and Severin Loth. I guess they'd be quite sad to see go away. Again, with Games Workshop's Huron model being retired, it really does point that Huron Blackheart might well be getting a nice new miniature. I'm certainly expecting to see a plastic kit for him alongside the Chaos Space Marine release. In any case, it's really quite cool to see a bunch of Forge World kits reimagined in plastic. I think for quite a few of these as well, it will actually lead to a small price reduction. Games Workshop new plastics are expensive, but in general Forge World resin miniatures tend to be even more so. Next up, we've got Games Workshop's Horus Heresy event. They announced this yesterday in a Warhammer community post. They've basically got some sort of new edition of Horus Heresy event happening on the 7th of May, held in Warhammer World, and that you're going to be able to paint Mark 6 plastic Space Marines, which implies that the release might be happening sometime around then. I wouldn't be too surprised if that coincides with the launch of the big box, or maybe being a weekend before or something. Seems kind of likely that they might do what they did with 40k 9th edition, having the really big Indomitus style box come out, and then have it replaced by starter sets after. That definitely gives us basically official confirmation on a timeline. I just can't see them really putting that event on too far ahead of the release of the big box. They've also announced a tournament style event in July. The event pack doesn't appear to be updated for a new edition yet, but the points limit is still 3,000 points, same as ones that they've held before. I guess when the new edition drops they might well update the event pack, but sadly no more new clues there that I can see. Next up, and maybe on slightly more shaky ground, is this rumoured list of releases and prices. I've seen this posted on a few different social media sites now. I'm not sure initially where it came from. Potentially it might have been someone on Reddit who didn't have the most clear sources ever. I'm not sure whether they were truly the original source of the information. It also seems to have been on Fate 212 and a few other places as well. The Fate person seemed to say that they're reliable, so maybe there is something in it. In any case, it looks kind of plausible as an initial offering, though I must admit it doesn't correlate amazingly well with the Forge World kits that have been removed. I guess if Sicarans and Leviathans are coming, they might be further down the line. In any case, the Rumoured Releases do seem kind of plausible. They're saying that the launch box is called Heta Gladius. Heta Gladius being a fortress world in the Horus Heresy that was fortified by the Imperial Fists as one of the key routes into Terra. It would kind of make sense as a setting, as it was a battle between the Sons of Horus and the Imperial Fists, and they are basically confirmed to be the two sides of this new box, as previewed in the launch trailer and these leaked images. According to this leak, the box will be £240, so likely corresponding to around about $400 in the US, so ridiculously and depressingly pricey. Though to be honest, for the amount of miniatures that you get in this, it doesn't actually seem that out of keeping with what Games Workshop typically charges. The box looks like there's 2 characters, 40 Mark 6 Marines, 10 Terminators, the Spartan Tank, Contemptor, and likely the new rulebook for the Horus Heresy 2. Typically with these sort of boxes, Games Workshop tends to offer discounts somewhere in the region of 30 to 50%, and going by that current pricing model, that does seem like it could be believable. I think one of the main contributors could be that Spartan Tank, which does look like just a ridiculously enormous kit, and something bigger than they've ever included in a launch box before. Still though, I'm sure that's going to be too much for a lot of people to justify spending on one box of miniatures, however generous, even if it does basically get you a full army in one box. According to this, the box will go on pre-orders around about late May for a June release. Games Workshop's release schedules do tend to be a little bit fluid though, and they will often chop and change nearer to the time. But again, judging by that Weekender event, it does seem kind of plausible to me. Otherwise, they came out with a rather detailed release schedule for the next few months following that big box, and if this is to be believed, it does seem kind of reasonable based on what they came out with for 8th and 9th edition. It sounds like there'd be a big rulebook, 3 compilation type books for Marine Loyalists, Marine Traitors, and then non-Marine forces, and then kind of similar to the boxes that they have for 9th edition 40k, 3 different starter sets coming out at £40, £100 or £180 depending on how much stuff you want in the box. Then there'd be the individual plastic release of the Mark 6 Marines, upgrade sprues for several of the more common legions, individual releases for Contemptor Dreadnought and the Spartan Tank, and interestingly releases for the Daimos pattern Rhinos, Predators and Vindicators, some of which will be available in squadrons as opposed to just individual releases. Like I said, I'd take these ones with a pinch of salt, it does seem kind of believable, but not really a fat lot of confirmation on this yet. A lot of it's kind of stuff that we already know. It depends whether the next releases that they tease will actually tally with this as to whether it might be accurate. Finally, a fair amount of the Horus Heresy rules do appear to have leaked to the internet. If you give them a Google, there's a fair amount of screenshots that you can see of various playtester codexes. It does seem to be the tradition these days with Games Workshop rules that they get all over the internet as soon as they're being tested. Games Workshop did confirm that it's going to be based on 7th edition, not going to be updated to 8th or anything like that, complete with vehicle armor, universal special rules, template weapons and the like. I'll admit that I'm not a Horus Heresy player, so I'm not going to be able to talk as intelligently as I would about 9th edition. In general though, as Games Workshop like to do when they release a new edition of their game, they do seem to be looking at just about every rule and every way that you can field an army, changing it up a bit, and it does look like it's going to feel like quite a fresh game, even if the core mechanics are going to be staying for the most part. Perhaps the single most interesting thing though, and one that I might try and explore a bit further in another video, is this concept of reactions. I must admit, a really interesting rules idea that basically seems to be somewhere between mini alternating activations or mini stratagems that don't cost command points, and basically give the player whose turn it isn't the chance to influence the game in a few different ways. Basically it sounds that each phase you get one reaction ability to do. So you basically need to decide where to spend that action, and you can use it to do a few different things. Say if the enemy moves really close to you in the movement phase, you could essentially move one of your units and maybe scoot them away or get them closer. In the shooting phase, if one unit fires at another, there's one reaction to allow you to return fire and one to get additional cover against their attacks. And when the enemy charges you, there's one for firing Overwatch and also getting a little bit better in combat, setting to defend. I think it's really quite an interesting concept. For me, it feels like it's somewhere halfway between alternating activations and stratagems, but only realised to a very limited extent. And I think it could be really quite interesting that the actual non-controlling player still gets the ability to do a few things, and it kind of feels like you've got the ability to introduce a few mechanics from 8th edition without the need for things like command points. It'll be interesting to see how that works in practice. I guess that these things might often just be hyper-focused around the biggest units in your army. But in terms of new rules, it seems like one of the more interesting and engaging developments. I'd really not be too surprised to see something like this happen in Warhammer 40k 10th. In any case, it could be fun to take a look at in another video. Finally, just among the new rules leaks, I did find it quite interesting that there was quite a nice little disembarkation diagram featuring the new Spartan tank, a view from above. Very much looking like you still have access points and things, but it's just quite cool to see that as a top-down view of the new miniature, which we haven't seen very much of yet. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed a little bit of a run through some of the news and rumours for the Horus Heresy release. There's the potential for plastic Leviathans, a May release, a very expensive box on Heta Gladius, and an interesting new reactions mechanic. I'm sure that Games Workshop will start a few previews in the near future, and I think it's quite exciting to get a bunch of the fancy dreadnoughts realised in plastic, even if I'll be a bit more interested in them for 40k use myself. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Always look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas, and particularly if anyone's got any more details as to these rumours and leaks. Finally, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, and I'm sure we'll have time for a fair bunch more news on the Horus Heresy as we get more details. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.